My first point of entry into the visual arts was in photography. And when I was first getting started, someone told me that, photography was mostly technical, learning about exposure, aperture, ISO, shutter speeds, that kind of stuff. But photography was also an art form. And the artistic portion of photography was all about composition. What is composition? Composition is the magic. It's what helps a photograph or artwork tell a story. There's good composition. There's bad composition. And then there's the ugly. Boo! In this video, I'll go over 4 different composition techniques with examples to help you improve your composition. So, what is the rule of thirds? The rule of thirds states that a frame be divided into 9 equal parts by 2 equally spaced horizontal lines and vertical lines. The rule suggests that the most important elements of the frame be placed along these lines or at their intersections. Let's take a look at this first example here. Here we have a photo I took a couple years ago of a dog. First question is, why didn't I frame the dog in the middle of the composition, right? This isn't a centered portrait. So why did I do that? So when we go ahead and apply our grid overlay to this photo, you can see that the dog is positioned at the intersecting points where the lines meet. Right here, right? That's the head of the dog is right around this intersection right here. The framing of the dog is also aligned on this line right here. And we've got all this empty space here filling up all these grid squares. All right, so this photo, it works for the rule of thirds. Now let's take a look at this next photo here. First question is, does this photograph utilize the rule of thirds? Well, notice what I didn't do. I didn't frame the woman at the center of the picture. If we apply our grid overlay here, we can see that, yes, this photograph does make use of the rule of thirds. We see the woman is more or less situated at the intersecting points of the grid. The subject is level and more or less aligned with our grid lines. And we have all this out here filling up the rest of the grid. And so that works. Moving on to the second technique, let's talk about framing. Framing involves using other elements in your photograph to frame and draw the audience's eye to your subject. Now, there are no shortage of examples out there of filmmakers, artists, or photographers who use framing to compose their shots. I found a few examples online. Let's take a look. Okay, first up, we've got this scene from the movie The Graduate. The way the scene is shot, you can see the main character is framed right here through her legs. When you're approaching framing, you always want to think about what kind of story are you trying to tell. And this particular example of framing paints a very seductive and enticing kind of story, right? So that's one example right there. Okay, let's take a look at another shot here. This shot from the movie The Master, where we can clearly see the use of framing done right here by the curtains. You see how it frames the main character right in the middle there. And everyone else is kind of just veiled, right? They're all veiled. So clearly, the director, the cinematographer wants to draw the audience's attention right there. So that's another example of framing used in film. This last shot that I want to show you is from the show Severance. So there's a lot of really good composition techniques being used here. In terms of framing, you've got the character framed by the shape of the table, but not just the shape of the table. You've also got the character framed by the carpet and this part right out here, right? So the separation of colors also adds multiple layers to the use of framing in this shot. So this is a really interesting one because it uses not just the most basic form of framing, but also incorporates colors and also shapes, right? You have these repeating, the shapes of the chairs that repeat all around here. That also helps frame the character right in the middle there. The next technique I want to talk about are lines. All sorts of lines, leading lines, diagonal lines, horizon lines, using lines to direct the viewer's eye to your subject. These lines can be physical, they can be actual lines that you can see in your photograph, or they can be implied or imaginary. Take a look at this shot here. Remember these creepy twins from The Shining? Take a look at how this scene is composed. Take a look at the use of leading lines to direct the viewer's eye past the boy, right? Right towards the creepy twins. Right? This is a really effective way of using lines to direct your viewer's attention. If you're into street photography, that's a perfect opportunity to practice using lines in your compositions, the way you can create perspective and, no pun intended, line up your lines. It gives you a great chance to not just emphasize perspective, but also, exaggerate it, right? Look at the perspective that you get just with using the natural lines of the architecture in the buildings. And last example I'll show you here, another photograph of mine, very clearly the train tracks. Then lines don't always need to be straight too. They can be curved, right? If you've got a curved path, you can also use those lines to help compose your shot and tell your story. And last but not least, let's talk about perspective. For this, I'm going to take you into a 3D project that I'm working on in Unreal Engine currently. I'm going to be posting a video to YouTube on this particular project soon, but for this demonstration here, I'm going to stick to talking about camera perspective. As you can see, I've got a rough version of the scene set up here. So we've got a character placeholder here in the lower left corner of the scene, a large desert terrain for the environment. We have a large sci-fi cargo ship that I modeled and textured for the scene. Now, eventually this ship will be animated, but for now, let's just look at where I chose to place the camera and why. I've opted for a low-angle perspective with this shot for a couple reasons. First, I want to emphasize the scale of the ship, but I also want to emphasize the character too. The story I'm trying to tell with this scene is about this unnamed character who is witnessing the arrival of these large foreign ships. I wanted the scene to be grounded in the character's experience. If I bring the camera perspective higher, as seen when I switch to the second camera, you'll notice two things. Number one, the character is obviously much less prominent, and number two, the viewer sees a lot more of the desert environment. These two changes in perspective don't align with the story that I want to tell here. Suddenly, the scene becomes less intimately linked to the character's experience. The story becomes more focused on the outside world, and the focus shifts more towards the ships and where they're coming from. In this scene, as I framed it initially, the ships are more of a mystery. We don't know where they're coming from, we can't see the broader world with the exception of the immediate ground in front of the camera and some distant fog-covered terrain. What you choose to focus your camera on is obviously important in the story you tell, but also keep in mind that of equal importance is what your camera can't see. If I want these ships to seem more mysterious, their mission and origin to be more of an unknown, then I'm going to show less of the outside world and be very mindful of what the camera shows the viewer. If I move the camera and fill my frame with more of the character, as seen in this example here, do you notice how the viewer might feel the story shift? The story becomes a lot less about the ship and a lot more connected to the character. Another perspective you might see in a shot like this is this top-down perspective, as seen here. Notice how you feel more disconnected from whatever is happening on the ground and more of an outside observer. You feel less attached, almost like you're watching from another ship above. The closer the camera perspective, the more connected the viewer feels. And the more distant the camera perspective, the more disconnected the viewer feels. It all depends on what kind of story you're trying to tell. There's no right or wrong here. It's about finding the perspective that best helps you, as the storyteller, to tell the story that you want to tell. So, use lines to your advantage. Use the different elements in your frame, in your shot, to your advantage. You get to tell the story here. You get to control the narrative of your shot. If you like this video, please hit the like button below and subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.